I am excited to introduce Jill Dempsey to you today. Jill is a friend and huge supporter of the Grit Center and student entrepreneurship. We were just together in Cedar City on Monday night. She doesn't live here in Ephraim. She doesn't live in Cedar City. She's volunteering to be here, so super generous. We're really glad that she is here with us today. So Jill Dempsey is a seasoned entrepreneur and executive with nearly 20 years of experience leading and supporting growth stage companies. As the founder of Liberty Equity, she specializes in mergers, acquisitions, and operational restructuring for family offices and corporations. And if you don't know what a family office is, maybe you'll learn a little more about that. Previously, Jill served as a general partner at Dolphin Capital, where she led over $100 million in investments and assumed executive roles in portfolio companies across various sectors. Currently, Jill serves as the executive director of U.S. Friends of AMAR, a nonprofit supporting displaced communities in the Middle East and beyond, through education, healthcare, and vocational training. Jill is also a general partner of Cedar Equity, a social impact fund that invests in the wedding industry by offering wedding financing solutions to couples, while strategically investing in venue real estate to drive value and growth. She's also deeply involved in education, serving on the board of Uplift Educational Solutions, an edtech platform supporting schools and students across Mexico, and a board member here at the Grit Center for Rural Entrepreneurship. Yeah, woo! She loves supporting entrepreneurial growth in students and rural communities. With a BS in Finance and Entrepreneurship from Brigham Young University, and a master's in nonprofit management from Johns Hopkins University, Jill combines her business acumen with passion for creating social impact through entrepreneurial ventures. So please welcome Jill Dempsey.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm so excited to be here, and bios always make people seem much cooler than they are. So yeah, so let's roll with this. So remember, my name's Jill, and we're going to talk today about some roads that I've traveled on as an entrepreneur. And I've traveled on many roads. It's been quite fascinating. And so as I've traveled on all of these roads, it's given me a lot of different views. Okay. So go with me on this, how I'm putting this. So we talked, or you heard my biography, and so you could think, oh, it sounds like it's been just a bunch of successes. And we're going to go through these roads that I've traveled on and all of these various views that I have experienced. It's been quite a magical journey, but gosh, I have traversed a number of challenging roads, a number of really exciting views, and I just want to share some of my learnings with you. And yeah, so let's roll with it. So we're going to just go through various snapshots. So I have a few logos here. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs, well, we all have various different roads that we travel on, right? Many entrepreneurs may have one business that they form, and that's the business that they stick with. I am of a very different approach. Some might call it chaotic, and my friends and I joke about it, where they're like, what are you working on now? And so you see an example here, which is a lot of different things. And the logos that you see here are one example, not even all of the companies that I've been involved in. So I want to start with let's talk about what I circled here, which is a company I was hired to be the CEO of. It's called Noah's Event Venue. So it was a high growth company, and they had invested $250 million in real estate, and there were 350 employees. I had a number of successful entrepreneurial ventures, and they came to me and said, hey, would you be the CEO? And because it was aligned with my experiences. So I stepped in as CEO. So it's all sounding good, right? Exciting. Multi-million in revenue, 350 employees. I go in and they needed capital. So the founder had been the CEO, and he stepped into a chairman role, and I moved into his former CEO role because he said, hey, this is growing faster than I really know what to do here, and I can't really handle it. So I stepped in. So then I raised some capital and I'm assessing next steps, developing a strategic growth plan for the next stage of the company's growth plans. But and I'm speaking ethereally here, my eyes kind of started to get a little, I started to sense smoke, right? I'm like, why are my eyes like feeling like smoke ethereally, right? Like what's happening? It just doesn't all seem like it's as good as it's coming across. Boom. I started doing some forensic accounting, and I was doing this in the background because I was like, this isn't adding up. And I identified just me and me alone. No one knew what I was doing. I did forensic financials because I'm a finance nerd. And me and my spreadsheets, because I'd work during the day and then I'd go home at night and I'd be like, beep, boop, bop, beep, boop. Like, what, how, why, huh? Long story short, I identified that there had been fraud. And this $250 million venture, the chairman and others had been committing fraud for years. And I was beyond anxious. And right when I identified that, I flipped open the white pages and was like, Securities and Exchange Commission, I need to call them. So I was a whistleblower. And that was such a fascinating experience for me because my ethics, I chose to put those first. And I said, gosh, this needs to stop. And so I met with the SEC and I walked in. You guys, we don't have time for this Dateline NBC show right now, but I walked in and met with the SEC. It was me. I walk in, my hands are like trembling, and there's 12 US attorneys and the SEC, and they say, and I'm like, I'm not in trouble, right? Like I identified this. And they said, we're really grateful that you brought this to us. We sensed that there was something happening, but we didn't have anyone like you to bring this to us. So fast forward, so that was in 2018. The company then, because of that whistleblowing and the evidence that was brought forth, company moved into bankruptcy. It took about 5 years for the U.S. Attorney's Securities and Exchange Commission, as you see here, to be able to bring it together. They indicted the founder and then chairman, and him and a number of other individuals are facing charges. Takes the system a long time, but he'll be in jail for the rest of his life. So that was one road on my entrepreneurial journey. Okay. It hasn't been, all roses, but wow, that experience was beyond stressful. It financially impacted me because I was loaded up with, challenges and because of it. But I'll tell you this, and I hope that none of you ever run into anything like this. But what I learned as an entrepreneur was the value of integrity and ethics. And also that when we run into times that maybe aren't successful, right? However we deem that, those can be the most valuable successes of our careers. And this was one for me. So I came across this quote as I was going through that trauma, and it's by Paulo Coelho, if you know that author. And the quote is this: rest a little, but as soon as you can, get up and carry on. Because ever since your goal found out that you were traveling toward it, it has been running to meet you. So I needed to rest a little after that experience. My resting was I went back to school and I started another business, but we all rest in different forms. But I needed to rest in my mind and really contemplate my learnings there. And I'd suggest that all of you take note for what that's worth for you in your journeys, that you are contemplating and taking in, absorbing your learnings and recognizing that, as I believe Paulo wrote in this manuscript found in Ghana years after he wrote it, that when you set your goals, they're going to come to you as much as you are going to them. And I have seen that time and time again in my career. So now let's talk about some other ones, okay? And I'm just going to rattle off parts of my career here. So Blue Stripe. Who in here has been to Europe? Anybody? Okay, so we got a few hands. Europe, a little different than rural communities of Utah, right? And of the United States. Really, how would we describe it in terms of residences? Tight, compact, right? I mean, little roads and fun places to eat. Well, hundreds of thousands, frankly, millions of students from the US go over to Europe each year, they go each year to do study abroad semesters. And I was quite involved with Blue Stripe, which was a study abroad student housing business. So we had thousands of apartments that we would lease and also began acquiring throughout Europe. So I was traveling throughout Italy, France, and Spain for the development of that business. So that was back in about 2016. I had just sold one of my other businesses. The investor in that business, who had also been on the board, called me right when I sold it and said, "Hey, Jill, what are you doing now?" And I said, "Resting a little," to go back to that quote. And he said, "Well, I just formed this business," which was Blue Stripe. "I just formed this business, would love for you to get involved." And when he mentioned France, Spain, Italy, I was like, sure, right? Sounded like a road I would love to travel on, figuratively and literally. So I stepped into that and it was a blast. So I was traveling back and forth. I spent a summer in France, brought my son over there, and I was working and able to be there and just enjoying the scenery and helping to grow the business, introducing systems. So at that growth stage, it was awesome. Okay. Well, the plot thickened 2020. What do you think happened with study abroad student housing in Europe when we were in Italy, France, and Spain? Let me rewind too. In 2020, we were quite excited because in January, literally January of 2020, we did a $20 million venture capital round. We had done two financing rounds before that. And then we're like, okay, now's the time to scale. $20 million round. Super excited, January. Okay. And I'm in Milan, Italy, the week of COVID outbreak. You can't make my life up. So what do you think happened in the business? What do we do? Any thoughts? Yeah, I'm going to motion what he did. Okay. So it was insane. The governments of those three countries and the local municipalities are very different than the US and how we sort of manage businesses. You're told in times, especially of global pandemic, you're told what you need to do, meaning we were told, okay, you need to get everybody out. US students also left, right? So immediately within 1 week, we had thousands of students and tens of thousands of students, thousands of apartments immediately evacuated, everybody home and empty. And they were obviously not going to be paying their rent, even though they had semester-long contracts. So done. Then the government said, well, we don't really care about that, but you as a company, a small business, need to keep paying your employees, even though we're in this whole global pandemic thing. So we had no revenue, employees that we couldn't lay off because we were told we couldn't. So we had a cluster of all clusters. And it took a year and a half of process to go through. I learned how to dissolve a company in Italy, ran a bankruptcy in France, and do disillusionment in Spain. We had to shut all of our businesses down. It was so tragic. So that was another one of my experiences. Any thoughts on that? Okay. I'm happy if you guys want to just share your thoughts. But again, I just wanted to share these roads that I've been on because no one was out there running a business like that. But also, and so we were developing this innovative concept, proving it out. We get into 3 countries where, venture capital firms here in the US were all about it because we were about to go buy $1 billion in real estate. And then the pandemic just put a major halt on it. So we couldn't have forecasted that in our SWOT. I suppose we could have put potentiality of a global pandemic, but I don't think that would have kept us as entrepreneurs from pursuing it. And nor do we have regrets because again, we are entrepreneurs and we did it. Okay. Next. All right. Rocketel. Okay. So then I got into the transportation business. Semi trucks. Okay. So anybody familiar with aerodynamic wings on the back of semi trucks? What's the benefit? Better gas mileage, exactly, right? So this company was founded by a former by a colleague of mine, his son-in-law. Okay, so his son-in-law, genius. He's like, hey, because there were some versions out there, but he had a better version, got it patented, and then approached us and said, hey, you guys know how to run businesses? I don't. I'm an engineer. I want to focus on continually innovating and developing this project. Can you build this business? So we went and developed this business, and it was quite successful in that I'd say successful in that we determined that the best model for that was not to, we were running into challenges scaling it because it was going to cost a lot of money, but we weren't wanting to go out and raise money to scale it ourselves. But we looked, and I'm sharing this with you because this might be something you run into, where you evaluate what's the best business model to meet the team's skill set. The team's skill set was this amazing founder who's an engineer. He wants to innovate. He wants to get into his engineering lab and keep innovating. So when I was continually bothering him with like, well, we kind of got to run financials and, we need to hire more people and we need to manage and lead those people and we need to have a strategic plan. He'd be like, Jill, why? Right? Oh, because it's running a business. And he'd be like, I guess. And so we had a great heart to heart and recognized, let's license this. Let's find a better home for this because then it could scale with a company that has infrastructure. Does that make sense? So we explored that option. Well, where it ended up is we had a great win-win here. We sold it to a publicly traded company. You're probably familiar with the semi trucks out there, Knight and Swift. You see those trucks every day, right? So we sold it to a subsidiary of Knight Swift, which is publicly traded company, right? Because then the founder of the company was able to move straight into the largest transportation business, right? And they are able to use this product, continually innovating it, and we didn't need to go and raise money to build infrastructure that Knight Swift already had. Okay, so that was a great example for me to experience, and was you don't need to have the same cookie cutter model for each business or concept even that you form, right? You can be entrepreneurial and innovative in even what your approach is. So I really valued that experience and as did the founder. Okay. Are you guys sensing that I've been all over the place? I've traveled many a road. Okay. Yeah, and transportation was so fun. So we did like test runs on testing out efficiency. And so before that, anybody familiar with Manduka, which if you can tell is in the yoga space? All right. It's the largest and most premium yoga brand, yoga product brand in the market. So when I was running a private equity firm, we acquired the brand, and it had been so successfully run by the founder, but it got to a point where the founder needed not only more capital, but also support, human capital, as you can call it, to take it to the next level. And so we, as a fund, were quite excited to invest in the business and help do our part to take it to the next level and help grow the product line, help grow sales channels globally, and additional, strategies to really expand it and also improve its profitability. So I led that acquisition. Was based in LA, and then I moved to LA and stepped in as CFO and COO. So I rolled up my sleeves got really involved in the yoga industry. It was so fascinating going from Utah, where I was in Salt Lake. I'd been in Park City and Salt Lake at the time, and we have sectors there that are like tech companies. I always say tech bros. And is that okay to say? So we had like those companies and financial companies. And then I was like suddenly in LA, and I was like, they're like, Jill, calm down. They're like, you need to talk slower. We need to go get chai, and then we'll consider having a meeting. And so I was like, okay, like I'm in a different landscape. I'm traveling on a different road. And it was a great experience for me to recognize, okay, yeah, businesses are all going to be run differently, right? And that you as a founder can run your business how you see fit, how you're going to be in your best space, traveling on roads that are going to be the most valuable to you, right? Or the team culture that you aim to develop, right? So a innovative transportation product company is probably going to be run quite differently than European student housing business, right? Than yoga company based in Santa Monica next to the beach, right? And so as I've gone across into all of these various different roads and environments, I've needed to like try to like breathe a little bit, because I need to not be a different person by any means, but be myself and adapting as best I can to environments. Does that make sense? So that I can support the teams and be a transformational leader myself, but also really come across as and be really accepting of company culture and founders, right? So I led the sale of Manduka actually only 2.5 years after buying it, which some of the other companies I've been involved in, we've had for like a decade. And this one, there was $1 billion private equity firm quite interested in acquiring it. We were quite interested in the numbers, so we sold it. Okay. Next. And then this just quickly, we did an acquisition of a yoga towel company 6 months after acquiring Manduka, and rolled that in. So talk about culture. I led that merger of Yogi Toes into Manduka, which was really fun. And so I'd say consider that even for small businesses, there can be such opportunity for win-wins to do mergers that may not even require cash. It can bring such benefit for companies to merge thinking, team, that human capital, product, also the sales channels and different customers that you have, and really develop that rising tide, which we had. Okay. I wanted to bring this one up because we're here in Utah, and like, do many of us know that we have the Artemia? Anybody know what Artemia is? First off, brine shrimp. When I grew up, it was called sea monkeys, and you could like order them and like have a pet sea monkey, which was like this little, I don't know, aquaculture thing. But Artemia is it's naturally grows in the Great Salt Lake, and 80% of the natural global harvest in the world comes from our Great Salt Lake. I never knew this until I got into this business deal, which was that we control the world's market, because majority of the natural harvest, because there's some artificial harvest done in like Russia and China, but the natural harvest is of far more value and greater demand. And we harvest it one time a year. It's in the off season for Alaskan fishermen. So Alaskan fishermen come down here in their off season, and for about a month or so, they go and harvest the brine shrimp, and then we dehydrate it and put it into cans. So what we learned is that there was a really highly competitive market, because there's a limited number of licenses for brine shrimp. And so they were like ramming boats into each other to try to go get like the streams of brine shrimp that float to the top in this limited harvest season. And so we meaning the private equity firm, we worked with the Department of Wildlife to develop a cooperative so we could have essentially create a monopoly. And now, so we were able to do that and protect this aquaculture economy, which is really vital for the state of Utah and nationally, and also the preservation of that vital aquaculture piece of aquaculture. And then economically, it has really great benefit. So that was fun. And traveling out in the Great Salt Lake, you don't need to do that. Okay. So how much time do I have? Oh yeah, it's just like the Dead Sea. No, I did not. Yeah, it's amazing. So the harvest season is like in the winter. So at least you don't have like the, summer nastiness. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to run through a few more and hopefully, some of these are of interest to you guys. All right, so now I'm executive director of U.S. Friends of AMAR, which is a nonprofit. So I want us all to recognize that being an entrepreneur can be in the private for-profit sector. It can also be in the private nonprofit sector. And you can also be an entrepreneur in the public sector, which in any of these sectors, working internally in a company or an organization, an institution, you can be, as they call it, an intrapreneur. So all these characteristics of entrepreneurship are vital wherever you are operating. So as an entrepreneur, I carry those, traits with me wherever I go. And the nonprofit world, and particularly, social impact is a real passion of mine. And I'm, as executive director of U.S. Friends of AMAR, really happy to be in that role. I was on the board for 3 years and then stepped in as to lead it. So we, as you can read here, the mission statement, we're focused on mobilizing support to displaced communities and refugees, particularly in the Middle East, and now also supporting Ukrainian refugees who are living in Romania, and then also local refugees here in the state of Utah. So I went to Iraq this year, which was an amazing experience. These are some photos that I took, and it had a profound impact on me, and it really confirmed for me the needs that they have for health, as I mentioned here, and their socio and economic needs that they have. We visited, there it's rural communities. Honestly, like it feels like Ephraim where I visited, and there are camps that were set up by the United Nations, and they're filled with local, displaced persons, and then there's Syrian refugees, and there are these communities of amazing people that need vocational training that we're working on. Okay, how do we help them set up chicken coops? How do we get them trained with what you guys are here even learning to do, and scale and entrepreneurial skills that they, with limited resources, are also trying to learn, right, in their small villages to reclaim their lives and be part of their communities. So that's where entrepreneurship let's talk about where we can have impact, is their communities here in the US and throughout the world, that entrepreneurship is the most vital tool to empower individuals and communities. So I'm really excited to be a part of that organization. So we lead medical and mental health programs. And we're doing $1 million research project right now with the University of Utah focused on indigenous music therapy, meaning choirs where you're singing and where you're doing indigenous music, and how valuable that is. And we're proving through research how valuable that is for treating trauma and developing and improving mental health. So we have a number of projects, and we have medical clinics in these refugee camps. We have vocational training, as I mentioned. We also support schools in the camps. And then we have other humanitarian projects. So like summer camps in Romania for these Ukrainian refugee youth that are able to better integrate with local youth, that they don't speak the same language, but they can have art camps together and recognize that we're kids growing up together and we're the same, right? So yeah, so I love doing that. And then now, as we've been talking about my various viewpoints, but on entrepreneurship, one of my companies is View, which is private credit for wedding financing. So anybody in here married or have a wedding? Yep, a few. Okay. I got married once. I really just wanted to, do some due diligence on this industry. So, okay, it's the most expensive single purchase of life outside of home and vehicle. The average now is crazy. The average is over 33,000 for a wedding. Okay. Yeah, what? There's 2.4 million weddings a year just in the US. That's not including destination weddings. There's 30,000 venues, 318,000 about small businesses. The industry is entirely small businesses, which I love because they need support and they put on amazing events for customers. But the entrepreneur, juices in me were like, oh my gosh, so I formed this after the Noah's debacle. I think it was because I was like, I want to prove that I can do this because I'd been running, 45 venues across the country. And then through that, I learned the needs of the industry. So once I shut that down and stopped the fraud and getting them in jail, then I was like, well, what am I going to do to help this industry? So that's really what led me here. And so then, so yeah, there's such amazing metrics to this industry. And so View, what it does is, and we don't need to go through this, but I wanted to show you guys how fragmented the industry is. Lots of small businesses, right? They're doing things like there's the valet guys, there's the bartenders, there's obviously the venues, there's everything under the sun supporting the best day of, the brides and the grooms, okay? In the $70 billion industry. And so and there's heightened demand for financing because it's costing everybody more and the pandemic impacted it. Consumers need help. We don't need to go through this detail. Let me just skip. Okay. So our vision is to bring accessible financing to consumers. And we do that by partnering with venues so that we're supporting the venues. Venues can offer their clients monthly payment plans. So when they're sitting down with their potential customer that says, oh my gosh, you have the date I want, you have this is where I want it, it's everything I dreamed of. And then they say, well, here's our, it's going to cost you $10K. And then they're like, we can't get it. Then they say, but we offer monthly payment plans through View. And then they're like, oh my gosh, we can do this. Okay. So that's what we do. No one else is doing it. I'm just showing you these things because maybe when you need to build a business plan, you can be like, use some of these ideas. Okay. Like these charts, I love doing where like everybody else is in the bottom corner and you're up there. Yeah. So do that. Okay. Now I put a bunch of stuff in here because I didn't know if you'd need to like hear from me for a long time. All right. So these are some of the venues we partner with. We partner with venues across the country, which is so fun. They're just amazing people. And we have a technology solution for that. And the last thing that I'll hit on, do I have about 5 minutes? Perfect. Okay. So the last one that I'm going to hit on is Cedar Equity, which invests in the real estate of event venues. Because again, I learned a lot through Noah's and then due diligence. I went back to school at Johns Hopkins and also did further research on the industry and how best to provide social impact to this vital and under-resourced industry. And what I learned through all of these roads that I've been, traveling on in that industry, seeing the needs and challenges, I recognized, gosh, venues are the hub of the industry. They're quite expensive and operators always need to buy them just to start their business. So I formed Cedar Equity, which is transforming the industry by, let me just get here. So that's actually, let me go to this slide. So we're a real estate investment fund. So we acquire the real estate to support the venue operators is what we do. And that is really just meant to support them. not only to buy the real estate, but also provide them additional capital. So if they're like, gosh, we really want to build like an extra barn in the back 5 acres and, have this extra development over here because it's going to boost our revenue. And so by buying that real estate, the structure is we lease the property to the operator. So it's a win-win for us, and we have fixed returns for our investors, and we're supporting physically the industry. And our aim is to really bring not only economic returns to investors, but develop social impact for those venue operators that are at the hub of the industry. And also, this really in turn generates social impact for all stakeholders of that large industry that we were talking about. So that's what I'm up to. And as you can see here, I even added some more logos because there's other things I'm working on and have done. And I just want to circle back to that quote, which is, as entrepreneurs, we can be doing a lot, and we can sometimes not take times to rest and consider our learnings, consider maybe what that road that we just traveled on showed us and how to incorporate that into the map that we're building. Right? As I have looked at my career, when I take a step back and I rest a little bit to really evaluate, I see now that, gosh, all these roads, what has it done? I have a really great map for entrepreneurship and how I want to travel through it, what's best for me. And that map is different than the entrepreneur that may be sitting next to me, but I have been able to develop that map by traveling on the roads. And so that's what I suggest for all of you is just get traveling. You'll learn. And sometimes the roads are rocky. Sometimes, you'll trip or you'll get a flat tire or whatever, but those have sometimes been the best roads. And, I'm grateful for all of them that I've been on. So I think, now we get to do some questions. Okay. All right. Do I have any? Yes, front row, guys.
I was gonna say, at what point in your life did you, how old were you, and at what point did you decide you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I was 8 years old. I didn't know that it was the word entrepreneurship, but it became my personal philosophy so I had a canned food drive. So it was also social impact, but I had a canned food drive. And here's what I learned is I did this canned food drive, stamped requests on all of my neighbors' doors, because I recognized there was a need there were people that didn't have food. So I went and I was able to fill not because of me, but my neighbors were so kind. We filled the back of the food truck, or my dad's Ford truck. So we fill it. Then I just call the food bank and I said, hey, I got a Ford truck here full of food. They're like, yeah, we're good. We have enough food. And as an 8-year-old, I was like, please hold. You guys are over-resourced, but there's a ton of people that need food. And that was when I had this light bulb in my mind where I was like, supply demand, from for-profit businesses, but also even, social impact of so it really was painful for me. I ended up, my aunt brought me to the apartment of a refugee family, and they had what's the word? Cabinets. And so we were able to bring all the canned food in there. And that's what showed me, okay, it's not just maybe about existing institutions that are going to take that canned food that I, am going to bring, but sometimes maybe I'm going to fill that gap of supply and demand. That's when I figured it out. So, and businesses have been that too, where I'm like, oh, the wedding industry, why hasn't anybody figured out that there's all these holes and opportunities? And then I'm like, well, I'll just do it if nobody else is. So, yeah. Anything? Okay. Back third. I bet you guys have some thoughts. Anything? Nothing? I just want to make it awkward.
So, Jill, what advice do you have for somebody that's like, this is great, but I don't know how to start traveling? How do I start?
Yeah. Is there anybody, so I'm going to say, is there anybody in here who's futzed around with starting anything, like a concept or like a pop-up? Yeah, here's what I'd say is I was in college and I started a cleaning company, and I was like, let me just go do this and just see what I learn. So I think just starting something is worth it, because look at it not as like, well, worrying about the risk of like, well, what if I'm not successful? Because I started with something approachable. Like, I'm going to start a cleaning company. And I was like, I'm not going to let anybody know about it because then nobody can judge me. And I'm just going to go see if I can get clients. And then I got a bunch of clients. And then I ended up growing it so much that I had all my friends working for me. And then I had somebody come up to me and be like, can I buy your company? And I was like, sure. What do you want for it? And because I didn't know yet that I could, like, pitch my company, and I could have gotten a lot more for it. But so those experiences is just, you don't need to like overthink is my suggestion. Don't overthink and just like get into it. Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna be direct. Any questions on this corner? Or I'll ask a question. So if you, in all that you've heard, would you have done anything differently if you were me? Like, in what you've heard, are you like, that makes me want to be an entrepreneur more? Or are you like, that's nuts? Like, what's your feedback? Yeah.
Bouncing around so much at my heart.
Is it what? Yes.
And instead of just speaking with one thing.
It is. Here's what I'd say it brings that uncertainty, right? Because I don't have like a fixed income. So, right? Like I look at, like, I've enjoyed it because I feel very free. Like, I'm not owned by, being in like a, like if I just had one company even. So I've liked having multiple things that I'm doing, because to me, that's risk mitigation. Is like, okay, let me focus on, I've got US Friends of AMAR, I'm doing View, I've got Cedar Equity. Some people can look and say, well, that is higher risk, because how could you be successful? Because you're not just focused on one. And that's where I'm like, well, you don't know me. Like, I would get bored if I was just doing one thing. So I think that's where I say you need to familiarize yourself with you, right? Because some people like get bored if they're just doing one thing, whereas others would not be successful doing multiple, right? So figure out what works for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need to-
Okay.
Thank you.